that I think has got it.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll just kind of clip it on wherever here. So yeah, thank you again, Mr. Jalsevac, for doing this.
You're welcome.
I super appreciate it, and yeah, we'll just kind of see where the conversation goes. They're a little bit like that. But we just spoke briefly about that. But you at one point were a zero card carrier. That's really, I remember, the craziest thing that I...
Well, maybe you start off introducing who
Yes,
I am.
okay, go ahead. Yeah.
You start introducing who I am first,
So, well, that's the other thing that I was going to say. I know a good bit about you. So
just a little.
Sure, yeah. So, Steve Jalsevac, founder of LifeSite News.
One of the founders,
One of the founders.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you through, you're my brother's father-in-law, which is pretty amazing. You're pretty pivotal in the work that's been going on in the Catholic movement in Canada and probably North America, kind of globally, I guess. And
it's been mostly the pro-life movement.
The pro-life movement, okay.
Yes.
And then I know that you are a world traveler and that you are a convert, I believe. So that's kind of the only stuff that I really know. But
I'm a revert, actually.
Okay, revert.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. So that's...
I was raised a Catholic, but that was born in 1947. When I say that now, it sounds like a really long time ago.
Yeah.
So 2 years after the war.
Right.
But, that is very important because having been born then, I was, and then later on through my parents, my father was in the army, and then my mother was in Holland and during the Second World War. She was Dutch, and then so the Second World War was part of my life very much, even though I was born after the war. But it was just 2 years after the war. Yeah. But there were all the relatives. They talked a lot about the war, but they didn't talk about the terrible things that they personally experienced. As being soldiers, that is. But they talked about what they endured, and there was a lot of tremendous hardships and what they endured from the Nazis, and then people and friends and family that they lost. So for me, a lot of those things were very real and still are very real. Right now, we're in a culture in the West. It is generally a very affluent culture, a very comfortable culture, although everybody has their problems and their issues, of course. But we've lost a sense of how terrible things can really be and how terrible they can get. And so that has actually played a really large role in what I've been drawn to. So anyway, I was raised as a Catholic, and then I went to Catholic schools, and we had it's funny, both Bonnie and I, my wife and I, had the same order of nuns who taught us. She was in Regina, and I was in Chatham, Ontario, and that was a very good formation. It was very different than what almost everybody experiences now, because the Catholic Church has changed so much since then. But then the 60s came along, and I went to university. And like most people who went to university, I lost my Catholic faith. Right. Or let's say, actually, I stopped practicing my Catholic faith. That might be more accurate.
Okay.
And because, the University of Windsor, where I went to, it was a religious order of priests that ran it. They had lost their faith before I did. Okay. Right. And so I went to Mass there, and they gave a strong impression that it really didn't matter if you followed the church teachings. It didn't matter if you didn't go to church and so on. And then that's what I did, because, it wasn't encouraged. And then I listened to the culture, and I believed a lot of what people were telling me.
Yeah.
But I had one or two professors who were very good at the University of Windsor, and I took economics and political science. And in political science, I learned a lot about communism, tremendous amount. And so I read a lot of books, and I especially read the books by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Those are pretty in-depth books about the terrible things that the Russians endured during communism. It's funny, today in our culture, we think of Russians as all being communists. But people don't realize the Russians endured the worst possible things from communism. Yeah. It came in from outside Russia.
Yeah.
and then Russia was used as the great experiment of communism.
Yeah.
And then eventually, of course, communism died there, but it still lives on in many other places, and I think it lives on more in Western culture, especially in North America, than anywhere in the world right now. China, I don't believe is genuinely an actual communist country now. It's more of an authoritarian dictatorship. It has the Communist Party, but it's different from the communism of Mao Zedong, and it's different from what was Russian communism. You know, I mean, it's a very wealthy, affluent society in many ways. But anyway, I'm telling you all these things because that forms who I am. You see. And so then anyway, during university, I gradually met my neighbor's daughter, who happened to be Bonnie, who I've married.
Nice.
Eventually. But when we got married, we were still 60s people, and we didn't practice our Catholic faith. Now, for some reason, we got married in a Catholic church.
Is that right?
Which was good. Thank God for that, you know. And then for the first 5 years of our marriage, we never talked about having children. But then an uncle came up to me one day, and he says, I was on this weekend, and, you know, it's something that you might enjoy. And he told me a little bit about it, and I said, nah, I don't think so. Thanks anyway, uncle. And he was one of my favorite uncle, by the way. Very good man. And anyway, so I did go on that weekend eventually. I shocked the heck out of him. A month later, I said, I think I want to do that. And I did it because I was witnessing my assistant manager in the store that I owned. I owned what's called a Collier and World paint and wallpaper store.
Okay.
Actually, I owned 2 stores at the time. But my assistant manager, I was a good man. I witnessed him going through a marriage breakup. And they had 3 young children, and it was horrible watching this, just terrible. So that's what convinced me and moved me to say yes to my uncle, because I thought, that could be me, you know.
Right.
Now, we hadn't talked about having children. We didn't have children. But somehow, for whatever reason, I didn't want to go through what he was going through, you know. So I went on that weekend. It was called a Cursillo weekend. And through that Cursillo weekend, I went through a very dramatic conversion back to my Catholic faith. And then I started going back to church. And Bonnie did the same thing. So we both ended up going back to church. And then we got involved in the pro-life movement. Well, first of all, we got involved in the pro-life movement, but at the same time, we became open to having children for the first time. And we started talking about having children. We had never talked about having children. Never talked about it.
So why didn't you want to have children?
I don't know.
It was just
we didn't know. It was just the culture, you know. And we used contraception, you know, and first of all it was the pill, and then after a while I thought, I read so many things about how dangerous it is for a woman. I says, no, we can't do that anymore. You know?
Yeah.
So you know, I thought no, because I was worried for my wife, you know. And then so anyway, then. We had the conversion, and then I got involved in the pro-life movement, because the Cursillo movement had a lot of people, especially Father Ted Culleton, an Irish priest, and he was talking about the pro-life movement a lot during his talks, and I became very heavily involved in the Cursillo movement, and I actually ended up being on one of the team members. So I was involved in many other people's conversions. You know, I played a role in, and including some priests as well. Wow. And so they came through back to the Catholic faith, or through Orthodox Catholic faith, let's put it that way, through Cursillo. Wow. So I was on teams for about 5 years in that. And then after a while I realized, okay, I got to move on to something else, you know. And that's what you're supposed to do. In Cursillo, you don't stay in Cursillo all the time. You're supposed to influence the culture. That's what you're supposed to do. As Christians, you're supposed to evangelize people. Anyway, I started getting these emails from Campaign Life Coalition because I gave them some donations. And then one day Jim Hughes called me up and he says, can you help us out with this? Whatever it was. I can't remember what it was. So as a volunteer, I helped him out while I was running a very big store, one of the largest Color World stores in the chain. And then gradually I was doing more as a volunteer for Campaign Life than I was for my store. Yeah. Now, it wasn't hurting the store because it was it was well managed. It was doing well. But it came to a point where I enjoyed doing the pro-life work far more than doing the business work. Right. Although I enjoyed business. I enjoyed being a businessman, and I learned a lot there, which ended up being very helpful to me. So, but prior to that, and prior to my conversion, and that's important in relation to why you're doing this interview, I was a card-carrying member of zero population growth. Right. while I was in university.
Right. Yeah.
See, I just believed all that they told me. Yeah. You see, so I was very trusting, and I read a lot. I read newspapers a lot. I read the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, the Telegram, which existed at the time, and then later on, what's the other paper in Toronto? So I was an avid newspaper reader, and I thought I learned a lot, and I knew a lot because I read these newspapers. I now realize I learned nothing from them. Right. Yeah. It was all lies.
Wow.
It was all propaganda,
Yeah. You were early in on the fake news.
Yeah, and I wrote a lot of letters to the Toronto Star. And they published my letters.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, they published a lot of my letters. Wow. I didn't realize that they were publishing things that were confirming their ideology. The Toronto Star is a very, I think, I forget, they what do you call it? What's that cult? The anti-Catholic cult. What do you call it? What's the major anti-Catholic cult?
I don't know.
Okay. You're as a Catholic, you're prohibited from being a member.
Oh, like Mason?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a free. Okay, sorry. Take that out.
Right. No. Yeah.
The Toronto Star, I learned, was run by Freemasons.
Wow.
It's a Masonic newspaper.
Right. Wow.
Okay. And very left wing, and so and I was writing letters in defense of more gun control because I was deeply disturbed by the assassination of John F. Kennedy and then his brother and then Martin Luther King. So I lived through those, you see. And anybody who's lived through those will never forget that. Okay? It deeply moved me anyway. It was horrifying. And Kennedy had his flaws, but there's never been a president like him since. Reagan was very good in many, many ways. But Kennedy, in some other ways, was even better. And he knew how to, it was due especially to him, but later also to Reagan, that communism fell. Anyway, so those assassinations disturbed me greatly. And then that's why I wrote letters and advocated. And then I started an actual gun control group in Canada. Wow. And we got national news. Yep. And I was on television. And I actually gave a presentation in Parliament. Wow! To tighten our Canadian gun laws. Yeah. Had I to do it over again, I would never have done it. Right. Because I realized the problem in Canada was not adequate gun laws. Right. It was our culture. Yeah. Okay. And we had adequate gun laws. Right. Okay. But I was I gave a presentation in a very large committee in Ottawa, parliamentary committee, and it did result in some changes to the gun laws. Right. And then since then, there's been a lot more proposals, which I totally opposed.
So when you say it was the culture, not the gun laws, what specifically about the culture is it?
Well, when there are assassinations and murders and violence, it is mostly the cause of a rapid decline in the practice and belief in Christian religion. Right. and it's a signal of a declining culture.
Right.
Is what it is.
Yeah.
You know? So in order to prevent crime and violence, you have to address the root cause of it. Mm-hmm. And the root cause is falling away from the principles and morals that used to make us so stable and strong, and especially family life. That's the key.
Yep.
You know, family life. Family life was corrupt, was falling apart.
Right.
Divorces were rising very rapidly.
Yeah.
And of course, there's the sexual revolution.
Right.
And this led to many problems.
Yeah.
Gun deaths are only a symptom of all of that.
Right. Wow.
And it's been proven over and over again. You can have all the gun laws you want, you're still not going to prevent people from murdering other people.
Yeah.
If they don't use handguns, they'll use another kind of gun.
Yeah.
If those guns are outlawed, they'll use knives.
Yeah.
And suicides you won't stop those either.
Yeah.
You see.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all just reason. It's just logic. Mm-hmm. You know. Mm-hmm. But so many people were influenced by the media, mm-hmm. and the media was the tool of those who want to radically change our culture. Mm-hmm. And those who want to radically change our culture were Marxists and other people from that kind of way of thinking. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so I eventually learned a lot of this from my university, that those few professors that were good, the others were not good, okay? But those were good. And I realized, especially from Alexander Solzhenitsyn, when I see certain things happening, I know what's going on, and I've got a sense of it. Most people don't see that.
Right.
They don't get it. Now, with all of my over 40 years of involvement in the pro-life movement, I've learned so much more, and I can sense where somebody is coming from or where they're trying to take us almost instantaneously.
Wow.
You know, it just comes immediately now.
Yeah.
I just know it.
Okay.
You know? And anybody who's been in the movement a long time, like I have, has that similar sense.
Right.
I've probably been in more depth than most people because it's been so many years.
Totally.
And I've usually been in the very high leadership positions,
Yep.
you know. So you see more, and we get a lot of people send us information. They call us, and we learned a lot from all of them. Mm-hmm. A lot of things that I can't report.
Right. Yep.
They're too confidential.
Yep. Yep. Wow.
So anyway, going back, so zero population growth. So I believe the world was overpopulated because of what people said and wrote, and especially the one book. Again, I can't remember the name of the book, but it was a small handbook and became a world bestseller. But you know, that there's an overpopulation crisis in the world, and of course, there was no overpopulation crisis in the world, and there never has been.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And as many say now, including of all people, Elon Musk, we are underpopulated.
Yeah. Countries.
The problem is how society is being organized and what people believe and how they live their daily lives and how family life is and injustice and corruption, and these are the problems. It's not too many people. So it's an irony that now you know, I'm a father of 8 children and a grandfather of 30 grandchildren, you know, so
Totally.
It's you know, it's just it's crazy, the dramatic change, you know. And all of these people are anti-Christian as well. Well, I'm a very, very faithful Catholic, you know, and would die for my faith, you know. So that wasn't the case before,
right?
You know, so it's just interesting. So anyway, that's how that whole change came about through the conversion, and another thing also, you know, the conversion wasn't. I mean, it was dramatic and it was major on that one weekend, but I still had a lot to learn. Tremendous amount. And so one of the things that happened that especially moved me to become involved in the pro-life movement is we were at the Toronto exhibition, my wife and I, and there was the annual Right to Life exhibition at the Toronto exhibition. They had one there every year. And Bonnie kind of nudged me to go in and take a look at what they had there. So they had a slideshow, and they showed the stages of the unborn child, and then they showed photos of aborted babies. And that shocked the heck out of me. I looked at it and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And then I realized I had been lied to, completely lied to by all of these depopulation people and all of these pro-abortion people. Right. And I was pro-abortion too, by the way.
Right.
But not actively so.
Right.
I was just in my, I thought women had a right to do what they wanted to do. But I didn't, I didn't belong to any pro-abortion groups or get involved in promoting it.
Right.
But I was pro-abortion. But after that, seeing those photos, that slide presentation, that instantly changed me from then on.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how powerful those things are.
Totally, yeah.
To those people who have an open mind.
Yes.
Now, my conversion opened my mind. Yes. You see, my conversion made me able to see clearly things that previously I would not tolerate looking at. So, and that's why showing those photos, even to this day, I believe are very, very important. They're crucial.
Yeah.
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 So anyway, those are just some of the things.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Well, that's amazing. Your story is amazing.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to shoot this interview, was because I remember at my brother's wedding, you gave a speech, and that was one of the things that you mentioned. You said, "Yeah, we have a beautiful family, and we're so blessed." And it's funny, the history of it is that I was at one time a zero carker, and I had no idea even what that meant. And I went.
Well, you pay their annual fee, and they send you a card, and you're a member. This card says you're a member of Zero Population Growth.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. It's unbelievable and fascinating to me to just see the development over a period of time, and then as well, I just see it again in your involvement with how much you were kind of trusting in the newspaper and the media, and then that's what you get into is newspaper.
I was a news junkie.
Yeah,
I really was.
Yeah,
I'd buy 3 papers every day and I'd read them.
Yeah, wow.
And I thought this made me very knowledgeable.
Yeah. I don't do that, but I consume podcasts a lot.
Well, it's very different now.
Yeah.
Now you're not limited to just a limited amount of news sources. That back then you were.
Yeah.
There was no internet.
Yeah.
Alternative news media were very rare.
Yeah.
You had to find some of these print outfits, but it was limited to how many people they could reach.
Yeah, it's true. So what do you think the connection between socialist or Marxist theory and media? Why is media predominantly left-leaning?
Well, they understood the power of media to influence people. And it was a propaganda tool. Yeah. And Marxism uses propaganda to a very high level. In other words, they have to change people's views and minds, on various issues, and they have to draw them away from their natural beliefs or their traditional beliefs. So propaganda is the tool, and they're masters of propaganda, Marxists.
Yeah.
And they're trained to use that as their number one device. So naturally, they infiltrate into the media and control the media. But it's not just. But who are Marxists? That's another question.
Right.
Well, Marxists are atheists, and they very frequently belong to certain cults. And Freemasonry, I would say, would be the most prominent, that they are. Now, most people don't know this because part of their, these are secret societies.
Yes,
you see? So you have to vow not to tell anybody what what the core beliefs of your cult are. Right. And you're threatened that if you do, you will be penalized even with your life if you do.
Right, yeah.
So, but on the other hand, we have to learn from them. We don't need to do propaganda, but we need to use the media to our advantage to tell the truth. And what I've learned through doing pro-life work, and I've learned it to be astonishing, is that by telling the truth itself has tremendous power to change people's lives for the better in almost every case. It's amazing, the power of truth.
Yeah.
When we started LifeSite, it just was a fluke when we started LifeSite. Campaign Life Coalition, the pro-life group, Canada's national pro-life group, became a very large group through a lot of the work that I did with Jim Hughes and other people there. And but we were only reaching so many people, and we still couldn't compete with the media. But the media would often report on what we were doing, and they report on our issues, and they would come into our office and interview us.
Wow.
But when it went on television or on radio, they would distort what we said.
Oh, wow.
Always.
Wow.
They would distort it.
Yeah.
And they would selectively clip from it. And then they would comment on it to misrepresent what we said. And their photographs and their videos would also be used in a way to strengthen their beliefs and make us look bad. And we were getting very frustrated. So we finally realized we had to start our own media somehow. Yeah. So we started the interim newspaper. That was the first thing we started. So that was a newspaper. And that did very well. It reached many, many thousands of people. But it still didn't compete with the mainstream media. Well, by the way, how we grew Campaign Life Coalition, one of the ways that really helped the most to grow CLC was, well, first of all, we had a very good relationship with all of the parishes and the churches in Canada, the Catholic churches, and a lot of the Protestant churches too.
Yep.
Okay, or not non-Catholic churches. They're not all called Protestant. There's evangelical, and then there's other Protestant. Okay, right. And there were amongst them a lot of very strongly pro-life people at that time. And well, we came up with one idea. It was a brilliant idea. I don't know who came up with it. It was probably Jim Hughes. But we decided to put ads in the newspaper, in the main Toronto dailies, which were read across Canada, by the way.
Right.
But to do that, we had to pay for them somehow. So we said we put flyers in all the parishes across Canada, but especially Ontario. Because I don't know how far we could reach at that time. And we asked people to just donate $5 to have their name put in an ad that we were going to put in the major Toronto dailies. So we did that, and the response was astounding.
Wow.
We got, I don't know how many, 15,000 or more names. I can't remember the number, but it was just astonishing.
Wow.
That gave us money to put really large multi-page ads in the 3 Toronto dailies.
Yeah, wow.
A number of times, not just once.
Yeah.
So like if you get the Toronto Star now, in those days the paper was much bigger.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And there were 4 pages of just nothing but the pro-life names, and then the pro-life message and photos within the names. That's a lot. Now, I mean, how many times do you see a 4 full-page ad?
Yeah.
And in the Toronto Sun, I think it was about 6 to 8 pages consecutive.
Wow.
Within the paper, in the regular pages. Not as an insert.
Yeah. Wow.
And in the Globe Mail of all.
Yeah.
These are all. The Toronto Sun was not so much pro-abortion, but the Globe and the Star were very pro-abortion and very anti-Catholic. And yet they accepted our money. But after a while, we started to do more of them. Then they started to say, wait a minute, what are we doing? Because we were being successful in opposing their ideology, and they stopped allowing us to put any ads in, even a small ad.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And the same with the Right to Life at the Toronto exhibition. eventually they were banned from being at the exhibition.
Wow.
And that stopped. So in your lifetime, you have never seen those at the Toronto CNE.
No, yeah,
No.
yeah.
But they had a very large exhibit at the CNE, and it was really well attended, and it was an excellent exhibition.
Yeah, wow.
Exhibit,
Yeah, yeah.
So they did a lot of tremendous evangelization
Yeah.
at the CNE.
Yeah. Wow.
So anyway, the opposition to life and faith, its main tool now is censoring. That's its number one
Okay,
tool.
yeah.
Now, they've always done the propaganda, but now their biggest difficulty is to censor our message because it's getting out way too far, and especially through the internet.
Yeah.
Now. Once the internet came out, then the truth started to explode into many people's homes and lives that they'd never been exposed to ever.
Yeah.
And it was a powerful tool for truth. So in our early years in the internet, and by the way, I should say, okay, so we started the newspaper, okay, and then after a while, Jim Hughes came and said, "People are telling me we should have a website on something called the internet. What is that?" So okay, so I said, "Well, you sure you want to know it?" Yeah. Well, it's a big job. Okay.
Yeah, right.
He says, "Yeah, well, you want to do that?" Yep. Okay. So he gave me the job of setting up a website for Campaign Life Coalition. So that's what I did. So now we had already had computers in our office, and I had never touched a computer in my life. But I was given the job of setting up a computer network in Campaign Life Coalition. Yeah. Because we only used typewriters. We had a lot of people, and they were all using typewriters.
Wow.
And then I had to set up a network in there. And then later came the internet. And then he asked me to set up the internet. So he always gave me those jobs, and most of them I'd never done before, but he told me to do them. Because, see, both he and I were both businessmen. I had ran a number of businesses, and he had as well.
Right. Wow.
So we were used to taking on these kind of challenges. Yeah. Okay. Most of the people who came in and did pro-life work were not of that type. They didn't have management and business experience. And then of course there was some of my university education, doing a lot of reports and studies and all that became very helpful as well. Anyway, so we started to do this website, and the first thing that I did was just simply one for when an election came up, we would put all the candidates for the election so that people could get that information by just going online. But of course, at that time, most people did not have computers, and even then, the computers weren't that user friendly. There was no Windows at that time. Macs were uncommon. So we didn't get a lot of people coming to see it, and it was a real big challenge to set it up. It was a huge challenge. I had to learn some programming, and that was difficult. And then we had to give it a name, and so I knew you had to look and you had to register a name, and I tried one name and another name, and then I came up with Life Site. That like other names I tried, they weren't available. I was frustrating, so I said, "Well, for now, we'll just call it Life Site." I thought that was kind of corny, but anyway, that's what I did. That's what it still is.
Wow, that's amazing. So that's where it just all originated from, and then you're kind of the dawn of the internet.
Then we made it Life Site News, and that actually exploded even more because that made it a real news service.
Totally.
You see? And then this young guy came in, and he wanted a job, and he had an MA in psychology, and he was going for a doctorate, but then he decided he wanted to do something better, more meaningful, and that was John Henry Weston.
Oh wow!
And so Jim Hughes. He came to just sell the interim newspaper, and Jim said, "You're not going to sell newspapers. You're going to do research for me." So he did research, and then he gave John Henry to me to help with the website. So we worked together on the website. Wow. And John Henry started sending out emails to people in the pro-life movement in North America. These are just spontaneous emails about information about what was going on and issues related to that. So we decided to incorporate that into our internet, and then that became LifeSite. Okay, and so and then also I did a website for Campaign Life Coalition. That was another one, and then I did a website for the Inner Newspaper. That was another one as well. So I was running 3 different websites. Wow. But it's not that I was programming them, but I hired people to do that. Yep. You know. So I just coordinated all of it, but it was still an extremely difficult challenge. It was very difficult,
for sure.
You know, and then John Henry and I, we did everything for the website. You name it, we both did everything that there was to do. You know, other than what we had to hire people to do, which was the more difficult technical stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so that went from one thing to another, and it just grew and grew, and we kept changing the design, and we got better programmers, and then a reader from the United States, a very avid reader, said, "You've got to incorporate and be in the United States. You've got to do that. You have to reach a lot of Americans." Because he just was amazed by what we were publishing.
Wow.
And so he paid the $5,000 US to incorporate us in the United States, and that was the best thing we could have ever done.
Yeah, wow.
Because it just exploded in the United States.
So it exploded because there was no one else at the time
doing what we were doing.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there were other pro-life websites,
right?
But they weren't doing the unique way we were doing things, which was a lot of news stories, okay, but on a broad range of issues, but also from a traditional Christian and Catholic perspective,
right?
Okay,
right.
And we were reaching people of all faiths, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't just limit ourselves to Catholics.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was the same as Campaign Life. All we were doing was following the Campaign Life Coalition strategy. In Campaign Life, we had a lot of non-Catholics there as well, working, even volunteering with CLC, and participating in a lot of our events and coming to our events and so on. So reaching the broad culture was the goal, to change the whole culture. You know, so that's what we did, and it turned out to be unbelievably successful. It was always very difficult, though. You know. But both of us were reverts back to the Catholic faith. Okay.
Right.
Now, in fact, all 3 of us, because Jim Hughes, myself, and John Henry were all reverts back to our Catholic faith.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is, all 3 of us stopped practicing any religious faith.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we came back to it, and that influenced our lives in a very big way.
Yeah.
And we've had like this incredibly strong support from Jim Hughes and from Campaign Life Coalition throughout all the years.
Yeah.
I mean, he played a very key role in everything. Yeah. You know. And through him, we met many other people that we're able to work with, to network with, to grow the influence of LifeSite News.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, that's an amazing, because the ability to, what I'm saying is the ability to start something like that is a lot of work. Like, I'm just doing recordings, and the things that I'm coming up against have been like, it should be easy, and it never is. And
nothing worth doing is ever easy.
Yeah.
It will, and the more significant and important it is, the harder it will definitely be.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah.
And that's very cool to me. Like, people's initiatives are amazing. Yeah. I love them. I want to do more initiatives. I want to inspire people to do more initiatives.
Yeah.
I just want to hear about people's initiatives. So it sounds like you had a calling, but did you know that you wanted to do news? And like, news isn't.
No, it just came.
It just fell into place.
Like, I've always been a news junkie.
Yeah.
I've always been interested in news.
Yeah.
But these things are like inspirations from the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
They're more of that than anything else.
Right. Wow.
You don't plan them.
Yeah.
Now, some people do, and they're very good at that, and that's a good thing to do that. But I never planned any of this.
Right.
Really, it just came. It just happened.
So you just
and I responded. You see?
Okay, yeah. So you said yes to the weekend retreat.
That's right.
You said yes to going into the.
And I had no idea what the retreat was going to be.
Really?
I had zero idea.
Yeah.
Other than it was something to do with the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you said yes to Bonnie's encouragement to go into the
That's
exhibit,
right.
and then that just kept snowballing into what it is today, which is probably one of the biggest. I mean, I can think of LifeSite News, and it might just be because I know, the people who work and have founded it, but CLC, I know, Camping Life Coalition, I know the people who work there, but those are the only two that I know of in North America. So is it the biggest in the work that you do?
No, there's few that do exactly what we do. We're actually unique in many ways, but like we cover a wide variety of issues.
Yeah, it's wide,
and that's very, very few pro-life groups do that.
Right.
Okay. A lot have learned from us to do some of that, but most pro-life groups are more focused just on the direct, what are called pro-life issues. But we learned it especially from some of the people who came to work for us, and then people that Jim Hughes had met in the United States and elsewhere, that there was much more to this whole issue of pro-life than just abortion itself.
Right.
That is, there was a movement behind it, driving it.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And it was an international movement.
Yeah.
And abortion is only a symptom or one of the impacts of that movement.
Yeah. Wow.
And one of the major parts of the movement is its anti-human population. That's one part. The other part is its anti-God. Okay. Those are the two main movements that are behind the whole abortion, euthanasia, infanticide, etc., assisted suicide movement. And so we'll never defeat abortion if we don't defeat or counteract the impact of those people who are behind it all.
Right. Yeah.
And so we had to expose them and what their plan is and what they were doing, who they are.
Yeah.
And we've done that.
Yeah.
Tremendously.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've become part of an international network of people. So I've done a lot of meetings with all the pro-life groups in the United States, and we've gone to Europe a lot. We've met many pro-life leaders in Europe, and people from Latin America. And I've gone down to Mexico. Myself and another LifeSite member gave a series of talks to all the pro-life leaders in Mexico.
Wow. In
Mexico City, and we gave them some information that they'd never heard of about the global depopulation movement,
right?
And also the movement against the family, which is depopulation includes in promoting ways of life that are I forget the word. Well, anyway, that don't lead to procreation.
Right,
okay,
right,
so that's why they're going to promote homosexuality,
right,
and promote all the weird stuff that's going on right now.
Yeah.
Okay, because these change people's sexual life into one that results in no children.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And it's a very diabolical movement.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
And so faith has always been a part of our reporting from the very beginning, because it's a natural component of it. And the Catholic Church was always a part of our reporting because it was the number one promoter of the sacredness of human life.
Yeah.
And it was the one that was best able to evangelize and teach on that and give rationale for it.
Yeah.
That why people should believe every single life is sacred.
Yeah.
No matter what faith you are.
Yeah.
And the popes, John Paul II especially, above all, was our great hero. I mean, he was behind us 100% all the time, constantly encouraging us and giving us whatever help he could. And so when we went to Rome, we got all the help we could possibly need from the Vatican, okay, for our meetings there.
Yeah.
You know, it was just astonishing.
Yeah.
You know, now that's different with Francis. It's not at all. In fact, it's the exact opposite now.
Wow.
You know.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult today.
Right.
But anyway, the church itself, the church teachings and so on, has been just a natural ally of the pro-life movement.
Yeah. So did you meet John Paul II and like?
I didn't meet him personally, but I've seen him in person a lot of times. You know, I was at World Youth Day and I covered that for LifeSite, so I was up close to him a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
But I did meet Benedict a
Really?
few times. Yeah, very briefly. You know, he was in Toronto as a cardinal.
Right.
At Ryerson University at a stadium there.
Wow.
Or arena. He gave a talk there at that time. And then later on, when I was in Rome covering some of the events there, I saw him, and in meetings, large group meetings with him. You know, so that happened. You know, so John Paul and Benedict were very impressive, but John Paul was especially impressive.
Yeah, for his time, he.
I mean, he gave his whole heart and soul to the pro-life movement.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, he warned us all of where it was going
Yeah.
and what was behind it.
Yeah.
And he encouraged everyone. And he wasn't just encouraging Catholics. He was encouraging everyone of any Christian faith and of any faith, actually.
And,
you know, he reached out to the world, you know. So he gave profound motivation and teaching. I mean, some of his the encyclicals he wrote are just astonishing.
Yeah, theology of the body is.
I mean, well, yeah, but there's others that that are theology of the body was a good one, but there's others that are even much better, you know, on this specific issue.
Right. Yeah.
So they will be good for all time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's absolutely.
So
And so there's a couple different things too that I find amazing about. There's 100 different things that I want to get into, but there's two things in particular that intrigue me, and it's the first one is that you said you've been in the work so long now that when something now happens, you see it for what it is. You just recognize it.
Yeah.
And the second one is, anyway, well, actually, we'll just stay on that. So what do you, like, what's an example of that you see, like, what's something?
Well, COVID.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Right away, I saw there's something really bad here.
Yeah.
Really wrong.
Yeah.
And there were very few people who agreed with me.
Yeah.
Now, not just me, there was a few of us, you know.
Yeah, right.
But, so we started writing about it.
Yeah.
Now, the same is with the Ukraine war. Mm-hmm. The same with Israel right now.
Right,
That is the hardest one we've ever had to deal with.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So why, if you don't mind?
Because it has a religious component to it.
Right.
That is confounding people.
Right.
And confusing them.
Right.
You know, the Jews are the chosen people, and Israel is the Holy Land.
Right.
Now, when this whole thing started with Israel, well, first of all, we went through the Ukraine war, covering that, and then the things we learned there, we were astounded. We had no idea about. See, whenever something comes up, and it looks like it's something we should cover, what we do is we make no assumptions one way or another about what the truth is.
Right.
We investigate.
Yeah.
We really work really hard to find out what the real truth is.
Right.
So with the Ukraine war, we found out, much to our astonishment, that there was a whole backstory as to why the Russians came in with their invasion.
Right.
And that story neither validates the Russians nor condemns them.
Right.
It's factual.
Right.
There was valid reasons for them to be extremely concerned about what was going on in Ukraine.
Right.
And that had to do with the United States and the deep state and the CIA and all of that, okay? People, as soon as you start talking about any of this, writing about it, people they right away assume you're pro-Putin and you're pro-Russia and you're anti-Ukrainian, and none of that was true.
Yeah.
We were just reporting facts that we learned.
Yeah.
But one of the things we learned right at the beginning, there were as soon as the invasion went on, there were all kinds of hysterical reports about what the Russians were doing and what was happening to Ukrainians. And there was a woman holding a baby in front of a hospital, and there was a crater there from a Russian bomb. And they said there were all kinds of mothers and babies that were killed by this hospital that was attacked by the Russians. And I thought, something's not right here.
Mm-hmm.
It's,
Your intuition.
my intuition said there's something not right. This seems like a setup.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And especially my experience with Marxism and so on. Okay. You know, and all I learned about, you know, how abortion propaganda worked and all.
Right.
They never showed an actual picture of a dead baby and a dead mother that was killed there.
Yeah.
And there were no American journalists there.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
In war zones, like in the Vietnam War, there were a lot of American journalists.
Yeah.
In this war, there's hardly been any American journalists on site.
Wow.
So you know, I kept thinking there's something not right that's going on here. Mm-hmm. As it turns out, the Ukrainians were using. Well, first, and they were showing these jets flying over, and they said, you know, these are Russians bombing Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. And then there was other people on the internet. So we go to a lot of alternative news sites, a lot of alternative information sites, because that's the only way you can find out the truth now. Because most of the media is all controlled by just a small number of people.
Right.
Okay. So we found out these jets that were flying over were Ukrainian jets.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Wow.
And then there was this one jet, the fighter, he's supposed to, the hero, I forget, they call him, of Ukraine, and he shot down a bunch of Russian. It was a fraud. It never happened. It was just a story to make the Ukrainians inspire them more.
Right.
And then we found out that the Ukrainians, soldiers, many of them were of a Nazi branch of the Ukrainians.
Right.
And they genuinely were.
Yeah.
Now, at first, people thought we were crazy and we were hateful for saying that, but they really were. It was the Azovs, and they have Nazi symbols on their uniforms.
Right.
Okay, and they weren't like not all Ukrainian soldiers were like that, but these were a certain core group, and we found out that many of them would assassinate Ukrainians who disagreed with fighting the Russians or disagreed with Zelensky, or were critical of Zelensky, or critical of his policies. Right. And there were a lot of other. They would tie young people to poles in public. Wow. And there were photos and images of all of this happening. Okay. And they were almost naked. Wow. And they would leave them without food and water. And the idea was like to totally humiliate them and torture them for everyone to see. This is what happens to you when you don't go along with the Zelensky regime and the Azovs. Okay. Wow. They even in one town, I forget the name of the town, but there was a whole pile of people found dead on the streets in the town. And I thought, this is unusual, you know. And the Russians had just left that town. But the people were laid out all along the streets in the town, the dead bodies of them all. And I thought, this is very strange. Why would the Russians do that? And then it was said that, well, they were in a hurry and they were in a rush, and these people were opposing them, so they just slaughtered them all and then left. And I thought, something's wrong here. Then I found, through one of the alternative sites on the internet, that these were the Azovs who likely did this to make the Russians look like monsters. Okay.
Right. Okay.
And that they as they usually do, either torture or kill people who are opposed to their views. They did that with that town that was tended to be pro-Russian.
Oh, wow.
And they were somewhat welcoming to the Russians. Okay? So they thought this would be really good to just kill all these people, put them along the street, send it to the international news, and all the West would believe that this is how evil the Russians are.
Right. Wow.
Now, I can't say 100% that's for sure.
Right.
But it's almost certain that that's what happened.
Right.
Because I know without any doubt that President Putin would have not at all wanted anything like that to happen. Okay, I know that.
Just for his public relations.
Absolutely, that's
so he would have been more neat and tidy about that type of project?
He knows that public perception is extremely important.
Right.
To justify anything that he wants to do. Okay.
Right.
Another thing we found out is the Ukrainians almost always used civilian buildings to shoot at the Russians.
Right. Okay.
And they would mix in amongst the civilian population to shoot at the Russians so that the Russians wouldn't kill them because they're civilians there.
Right.
And they knew the Russians had strict orders not to hit civilians, not to target civilians.
Okay.
They had very strict orders not to do that.
Right.
It was their orders were to attack military sites only.
Right. Okay.
And anyway, there's so much more.
Yeah.
I could go on for hours about all this, but I learned this from other people. You see?
Yeah.
Because we weren't there in Ukraine.
Right.
But we learned it from a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And we learned it from people who we found out over time we could really trust.
Okay. Yeah. So I was going to mention like the news sources are like what's the word, the reporting.
Yeah.
The reporters.
Yeah.
You have built like rapport with them.
Yeah.
You have
here's
found
this.
these.
Well, I tend to look for sources where they have nothing to gain one way or another from reporting what they are reporting.
Okay, yeah.
Like there's no money in it for them.
Right.
And there's no political advantage for them.
Right.
It just they're and no career advantage.
Right.
They're just those are the people I most try to rely on and find.
Right.
Okay, so even Colonel Douglas McGregor, currently on the two wars, he's one of our top sources. Mm-hmm. There's nothing in it for him to reporting truth about those two wars.
Right.
That gives him all kinds of trouble and criticism and condemnation.
Right.
Okay. He doesn't need the money. He doesn't need the public exposure.
Right.
He's just extremely concerned for the United States.
Right.
And concerned for world peace. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's all. So I now one of our people has a good personal relationship with him because he lives very close to her.
Right.
And she has interviewed him a few times on camera.
Okay. Wow.
And he's told her things that actually nobody else hasn't told anybody else.
Right.
And we've been able to report that because of the trusting relationship we have with him.
Right.
You see?
Yep. Yep.
So there's that. And then the Israel, so then it happened the November 7th, okay, it happened. And now with the Ukraine thing in mind, and then November 7th happened in Israel.
Yeah.
Right away, the very first day, or the day after, there was a report, an NBC reporter, a woman, in front of a bunch of Israeli soldiers, and she was saying, "We're here," in a very somber voice, and there's a situation. There have been about, I think I said 14 babies who've been found with their heads chopped off.
Right.
And the soldiers are very disturbed, and this is a horrible situation. And right then, the way it was set up, the mood, no evidence given.
Right.
Nothing shown.
Right.
I thought, this is Ukraine all over again.
Right.
They're doing the same thing.
Mm.
This is propaganda.
Right.
Now, October 7th was horrible. We condemn it. Mm-hmm. You know, you have to condemn it. Anybody who's humane would say that was terrible what Hamas did on that day.
Yeah.
But there's much more to the story.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
And so this one has been by far the hardest for people to believe us because it's so extremely opposite to everything they've been told about Israel for the last several decades.
Which is?
First of all, it's a Zionist state.
Right.
I didn't know what Zionism was.
Right.
On October 7th, I didn't know what Zionism was.
Right.
And I knew nothing about the history of Israel.
Okay.
The Israeli state, I should say. Okay?
Yeah.
I knew hardly anything about it.
I know a little bit.
It's the Holy Land.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So then we started doing digging. Mm-hmm. We did a lot of digging. Mm-hmm. And then we found out a lot of alternative websites and a lot of very credible people. People, former CIA agents, former inspector, United Nations inspector on nuclear weapons, okay? Former FBI agents, Catholic people in Palestine and in Israel and the area, the bishops in that area, non-Zionist Jews, non-Zionist rabbis, and the list now it's very long.
Right.
The list is very long.
Wow.
And they're all telling us a story completely different than you see in all of the news media.
Right. Wow.
And it's a horrifying story. It's terrible. And it's been one of the most disturbing that I've ever covered.
Wow.
Now, not that abortion hasn't been disturbing.
Yeah.
It has been
Yep.
extremely disturbing,
Yep.
you know. But this one is different. It's in the name of religion, people are being slaughtered in large numbers. Now, what happened on October 7th was not a religious act of Muslims hating Jews and killing them because they hate Jews. That isn't why that happened on that day.
Right. Okay.
There is a whole story to it that goes back to 1948, but actually for about 75 years prior to that as well. Okay. And it's much too long to tell in one interview.
Yep.
But
Yep.
you can read it all on LifeSite News and
Yep.
all of our stories.
Yep.
We have 6 different people that have been working on this.
Wow.
And they're our top reporters, okay? And they're connected with a lot of other people.
Right.
It does have religious dimensions to it. But Zionism is what runs Israel. But there's different Zionists. They're not all the same. There are some Zionists, they're actually pretty good people, you know? And there are other Zionists who are really scary people.
Right.
And very violent. And there are certain Jewish sects, sects, you know, who have very extreme beliefs. And they are racist supremacists who believe that Jews are above all other people.
Right.
And it goes on, like it is scary reading, okay? And it's scary to learn about. And you cannot trust, we learned, anything that the government of Israel says about all of this.
Right.
Most Zionists who began Zionism and founded Israel are atheists, and were atheists.
Wow.
They were not religious believing Jews. And they didn't, Israel, that is Jerusalem and region, was not where they were originally going to have their Israel. They had planned to do it in Africa. Then they thought of South America. They were arguing about where they should start their own state, Jewish state. And eventually it was decided that the most propaganda-wise useful one would be to have it right where Jerusalem is.
Right. Okay.
That could justify it most. you know?
Right.
So, and I knew none of this before.
Yeah.
And you know who I've learned most of it from? Jews.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I knew the history that I know is a thumbnail sketch of obviously the like medieval wars and whatnot that were going on. The like Islamic kind of domination of the land.
And I know all about that, and I've written about that.
Yeah. And so it's funny, we have an encyclopedia at home from like 1970, and that my dad won in a science fair or something. And so I was reading through it about like the Holy Land and the history of it, and it takes it through like prior to World War One, the different like Arabic, and then like the French colonies, and then France, and like the Treaty of Versailles that France returned it to returned the Holy Land to the Jewish people. So because they had all these ghettos, which were Jewish colonies in the New World or wherever, and they just said, okay, here's a place. So that's like a very thumbnail sketch, obviously. But you're saying that the Zionists, the radical Zionist groups, have played a part in all that.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. It's well, we published an article. I published. I'm doing a series of articles right now. Actually, it's long overdue. I've been meaning to do this for a number of months, and I just haven't been able to get around.
No illusions.
Do
not kid yourself.
Wait a minute. Whoa.
That's exactly what you believe.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
What's going on
You
here?
believe?
Sorry.
No, not at all. Yeah.
Let me see.
Yeah, pretty. We
I don't know
They're
what.
not compatible with the beliefs of liberty, which the MAGA movement claims to support.
Just
You
a minute.
cannot
I don't know
believe
what
in the Constitution and also support Zionism at the same time, because they are irreconcilable.
I don't know where
You
this.
believe in what Dr. Martin Luther King taught humanity, that people should be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, and certainly not their ethnicity.
Get rid of this here.
Yeah, no stress.
Okay. Okay. That was Mike Adams. Somebody sent me that just yesterday.
If you believe in Dr. King's message, then you
now it
cannot
comes
believe
again.
in Zionism. You cannot be on the side of Zionism. And if you choose to be
I don't know
so,
why this keeps coming up.
history will judge you harshly,
My goodness.
and probably so will God. The true path to freedom for humanity is to denounce all forms of slavery, apartheid,
This is a very weird
ethnic
situation here.
supremacy,
Yeah, no problem.
authoritarianism, tyranny, and genocide. Denounce it all, without exceptions. If you oppose slavery and apartheid, if you oppose genocide, and if you oppose the Holocaust, you have to oppose those things for all human beings. You cannot carve out exceptions. Like, mass slaughter of human beings is wrong unless they're Palestinian children, unless they're in Gaza, unless they're in Lebanon. It doesn't fly. Principles have to be universal, or they are not principles. The fact that a group with a lot of money wants you to look the other way and excuse their apartheid, their genocide.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, by the way, that is a really good talk.
Oh yeah.
He kind of puts it all
Yeah.
together.
What was the name of that?
I'll have to find it
Yeah,
again.
no,
Yeah. Anyway, so this an article. This is part 3 of my series of articles, and it's non-Zionist Jews speak out about Israel and Zionism. So, well, in this particular one, I just do a short commentary, introduction to Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, who is an expert on Zionism versus Judaism. He's very, very good. And I show the video, and then I have the full text here on the video. But he makes it very plain that there's absolutely no political relationship between the Jewish people and Jerusalem. It's merely a holy city. The Jewish people don't have a capital. We never had a capital. Countries have capitals. States have capitals. That's the definition of a capital. Capital, dictionary, noun. Now, the Jewish people are not a country or a region. The Jewish people are a religious community. We pray towards Jerusalem, but we relate to Jerusalem only as a holy city, not as a political capital of the Jewish people. And because it's a holy city, it doesn't matter who has sovereignty over it. Jerusalem is just as holy and just as much Jerusalem, whether it's under the auspices of the Turks or the Romans or the British or whoever. It's important to know that the Zionists were the ones who started this business of the capital of the Jewish people, and it's an idea that conflicts directly with the teachings of Judaism. At Mount Sinai in the desert, the Torah says, the Bible says about us, Hayam Hazaz Neyeh Salam. That's when we became a people. The Jewish people aren't a people because of a land. We're a religion. Your Jewishness is because you accept the religion. A couple of years ago, the Pope went to visit Netanyahu, and Netanyahu was bragging to the Pope, this is where Jesus lived, in this land, and he spoke Hebrew here. So the Pope corrected him. The Pope said, no, Aramaic, and the Pope was right. So, he goes on and on. But he says Zionism is the opposite of Judaism. Zionism is anti-Semitic. And anyway, I knew none of this, and I've learned it from him.
Yeah, wow.
And
that's amazing.
Oh, it is amazing. See, if you are open to the truth and you do some research, it's astonishing what you will find.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've been astonished over and over and over again through all the years of doing this pro-life work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you, as someone who has experienced openness to the truth in your own life and now dealt with it in a mass scale, what are the things what are the things that are opposing people from being open to the truth?
Fixed ideas.
Okay, yeah.
Closed minds.
Right.
Ideology.
Yeah.
Lack of true faith in God. Lack of trust in God.
Okay, yeah.
Now, if you don't trust in God, you won't be open to things that contradict some of your strongly held opinions.
Yeah.
Or what you've been told by people.
Okay.
Now, one thing I will not ever change is my faith.
Right. Yeah.
Nothing changes that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've encountered Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And, that weekend, during that Cursillo, in a very spiritual, strong way, I met Christ, and I know the truth of Him and my Catholic faith. Mm-hmm. Nothing can change that, you know. Mm-hmm. But and the influence of media is especially a powerful influence on people's minds.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's like because I had a conversation with a girl who we were just talking about the faith. And she was secular, kind of agnostic.
Yeah.
And she goes, we were having this type of conversation, and I mean, I have formulated ideas, but nothing really too concrete as a response. I haven't thought about it since then, quite honestly. But she goes, so you're saying that you have to have an openness to truth, and yet you'd be willing to die for this other truth, and like And I was saying, yeah, okay, like it does seem like a contradiction, but the way, and I would love to hear you speak on this, because like the way that I came to the truth of Christianity, which I'm not going to budge on, God willing, and that I would die for, God willing, is it came through a road of peace and like love, an experience of love, and a revelation that was logic, that was founded on logic.
I think that's a good answer.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, that's a very good answer. Yeah.
And versus the other things that I've been rigid in my life, and there's many of things where just all of a sudden I was really quite humiliated because I was wrong.
Well, but Christianity makes total sense.
Right.
It's totally logical.
Yeah.
Know? And that's why a number of people come to faith through reason alone.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that then the grace of God comes into their hearts. You know.
Right. Yeah.
But reason can bring you to Christianity.
Yeah. 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 That's true.
Yeah.
And so
pride interferes with reason.
Right. Yeah. Because that's what anytime I'm anxious or afraid, I become rigid.
Yeah.
It's a rigidness and I then will become defensive. Yeah. Or I will become agnostic to the opinion. But it's really, I have retreated inwards. And so do you have methods with your news that also, by the way, like Mr. Jalsevac, I don't want to keep you, I'm super enjoying the conversation.
Another about a half hour.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I don't want to just take advantage of your
You call me Steve, by the way.
Steve, okay, yeah. I've been switching back and forth because I'm pretty sure you've mentioned that, but we've got it on record now. No, and thank you again, Steve, for doing the conversation with me.
Sure.
This is very, very fascinating. But are there methods that, like, again, for instance, just showing someone a pro-life sign, they have to be receptive to the truth before the pro-life sign really it will bring them an effect?
Well, it also depends on who's holding the sign.
Okay, yeah.
And how they're holding the sign.
Okay.
And how they respond to anything you might say to them.
Yeah.
See, what converted me was the people on the Cursillo weekend.
Okay, wow.
I saw Christ through them.
Right, wow.
And they were totally accepting and loving and kind to me. Mm-hmm. And they weren't judging me.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
While telling me their own personal life story.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they were humble enough to tell very personal things about their own lives.
Right, yeah.
That I identified with. Mm-hmm. So, it's how you do things that makes a very big difference. Mm-hmm. So right now, what do people think about Christians in general? Probably a lot of bad things right now, because a lot of Christians are behaving very badly right now.
Right, yeah.
And living a life that contradicts what they say they believe.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so it's key to a lot of things. So in LifeSite News, we try to tell the truth with charity. Mm-hmm. But charity does not mean withholding things that are uncomfortable. Yeah. But it's how we tell them. Yeah. And we can't attack people. We can't condemn people. Mm-hmm. I never write off people who are showing some degree of goodwill. I never write them off, okay, no matter who they are. So a lot of people have written off Jordan Peterson. A lot of people have written off Elon Musk. A lot of people have written off Donald Trump. Now, they all have things that we should be seriously concerned about. There's no doubt about it, okay? But we should have hope that they can experience conversion.
Yeah.
And we are obliged to pray for them.
Yeah.
So I've seen Dr. Bernard Nathanson personally. I've known him personally. And I saw a man who went through a conversion from being one of the leading abortionists in all of North America and responsible for 50,000 baby deaths himself.
Wow.
And he was an atheist. He was an atheist Jew. And he experienced conversion through a couple of things, primarily through the love and acceptance of the protesters who were at his clinic every day.
Wow.
And secondarily, although he says he said it was played a bigger role through seeing ultrasounds of what happens to the unborn child when they're aborted.
Jeez,
you know?
yeah.
But actually, he became a very strong, believing Catholic in the end. And he suffered for it. He endured a lot of heartbreak from having to face what he did. But he did, you know, and he was a great man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow, yeah. And then, I mean, that's beautiful. When you hear stories like that, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm just blown away at them and everything like that. But and just quickly on more of like a topical thing, you bring up you mentioned Trump, but what do you think of him? What do you see?
Well,
what's your intuition telling you?
I'm very concerned right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Deeply concerned. In the beginning, when he first ran for president, just before he was nominated, we were all really upset about him.
Okay.
And we didn't like him at all.
Okay, yeah.
Then once he started campaigning, he was working together with a lot of Christians and a lot of Catholics. And he was saying a lot of good things. And then in his first 3 years as president, he did a lot of really good things. It was not without fault.
Right.
But still, he was, and genuinely was, the most pro-life president that there ever was, that we are aware of. Okay. He gave some of the most amazing speeches I've ever heard from a politician.
Right.
At the United Nations, in Europe, and his State of the Union addresses were astounding. They were incredible. They were moving.
Yeah. Then
came COVID. Then something happened to him.
Okay.
And he's never been the same since then.
Okay.
You know, he made many major errors, did some really bad things. And in the last year and in recent months, he's been saying some things that have been really disturbing.
Okay.
So now people say, because you say that, you want Harris for Trump. Well, of course not.
No,
Nobody wants Harris. I mean, none of us authentic Christian, authentic pro-life person would ever want Harris. That would be our worst nightmare.
Yeah.
You know?
There's a handful of celebrities that are being forced to vote for Harris. So yeah.
But Trump, I don't know. Something or someone is influencing him in a very bad way right now.
Okay, yeah.
Now, he still has some really good policies, you know, that we should be very grateful for. If he's elected president, they're very good. But I fear many people will experience buyer's remorse if and when he becomes president.
Right.
And I don't know what's going to happen, but I have just bad feelings, bad intuition.
Wow, okay, yeah. Because I know, like, I don't follow. I am not a news man.
Yeah.
I never have been someone who really followed the news more than a few people occasionally reporting on it.
Yeah.
Occasionally checking in on LifeSite just about a topic that I hear some scandal somewhere. Okay, what's this perspective take on it? But. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I look on news reporting, being a journalist, as somewhat of a vocation.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I do this to serve God and His truth. That's why I do it. But that's not for everybody, you know.
Right.
And I've always been drawn to news all of my life, even as a child. So I think it's because my mother was very much in the news all the time.
Yeah,
you know?
right. Yeah.
That's probably why. Yeah.
And it's absolutely a vocation because to even have your ability to see, and I like to think that I have the ability to see a news report and trust my instinct on it.
Yeah.
And I generally I'm pretty good.
Good.
I would say that, but that would heavily be influenced by my father, who would
of course,
I grew up listening to him, and he would listen occasionally he would listen to a bunch of different things, but we'd be in the car and he'd have CBC on, and he would be vocally disagreeing with them as we're driving around. So I got to know pretty quickly that Peter Mansbridge was not, or whoever it was not the, not telling the truth. So
thank God for your father.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. But it's absolutely a vocation because again, like I don't even have the stomach to research the topics.
No.
Because emotionally, it's such a...
No, the work I do is, we deal with the most difficult issues that there are.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's gut-wrenching very often, to deal with it.
Yeah.
Most people can't do what we do.
Yeah,
Because we face head-on the worst things imaginable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's topics that...
And you have to have a very thick skin.
You do.
Which I don't really have, actually.
Okay.
But somehow I endure it because you get a lot of backlash from friends, family, all kinds of people, you know, priests and nuns, and, But, my attitude is, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do, because they're not doing this all day with a whole team of people every day for so many years like we are.
Yeah.
So they can't know what we know, and it's not as, we've gone through a lot to understand what we understand. It's taken years. Mm-hmm. So we just keep going on, and eventually people usually come around to understanding why we report certain things. That's usually what happens. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've had a lot of occasions people say, I'm not reading anymore, I'm not donating anymore, and that's it because you report on this. And then a few years later, they're back.
Well, and do you think that's first off, absolutely, I could totally see that, because one of the things that happens in society, like when gay marriage was introduced and everyone was like, first off, the opposing argument for why it would be harmful for a someone who was even homosexual to engage in this. Which there's a lot of them that are silenced. But when that first came around, everyone was like, "Wow, what's the big deal?" And then that same line of logic is amped up to, like, once you remove procreation and unity, you split them from being the definition of marriage. You have just unity, and that just becomes harmony, and then you have a whole host of issues going on with You're a tough guy, but like body dysmorphia.
You can't violate nature.
You can't.
Well, no, you can. You have the free will to do it.
Right.
But you will pay a consequence.
You will pay a consequence. It's unforgiving. Nature's unforgiving with, except for the exceptional miracle that does very much happen. But so people who say, I disagree with you on this point, generally when that false logic keeps following to the next ideology that takes movement, people go, well, hold on, I didn't sign up for this. And I feel like that's when people would return to your sort of, oh, they were saying this in the beginning. Because, again, that's something that...
Well, what I find is as time goes on, what we initially said becomes more acceptable.
Yeah, right, okay.
And then, because there's truth eventually manifests always.
Right. Wow,
See?
True.
So we just happen to be too far ahead of the curve almost all the time.
No, absolutely. And if you start from the correct starting principles, then you can kind of predict what the that's amazing. So what do you see? Sorry, go ahead.
So what John Henry and I frequently used to say, a story would come up and we'd talk about it. We'd say, oh, should we report this? I go, oh, I don't know. Gosh, yeah. Then we say, well, we have to.
Yeah.
regardless of what happens, it's true. We have the evidence.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, we'll have to report it.
Yeah.
And that's happened many, many, many times.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how do you deal with, because you're saying you have to be thick-skinned, but you're not thick-skinned, which I don't believe. I believe you are.
No,
but
I'm not.
No? Okay.
No, I'm
so
not. No.
so how do you, do you have outlets for that? Do you have...
I don't know. When I was a young child in school, I didn't get high marks in elementary school. And the principal of the school, who was also one of my teachers, would come up to me and say, Stephen, you have an ability to really focus your attention while a lot of things are going on around. That will be very good for you in the future. And I said, and I didn't know what she meant by that at all. At that time, but that seems to be one of the things that keeps me going.
Wow.
I grew up in a very tiny, fairly poor house where there was a lot of noise all the time and a lot of fighting all the time. And I just learned to just focus on what I was trying to do and that just happened.
Wow.
So, in other words, when there's all the noise going on in the background, I'm focused on what I have to do. I just am able to do that. Now, it exhausts me, but I'm able to do it. So that's what I do.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And then, but on these issues, when I know something's right, I just continue it. If I'm convinced it's right, I will continue no matter what anybody says, because I'm convinced it's correct. Yeah.
And there's almost a consolation you can. I mean, it doesn't make it easier, maybe. I don't know.
And it's not my opinion. It's because the evidence has shown me this is correct.
Yes.
It's always the evidence.
Yeah.
You see, it's not. I don't run on opinions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's too dangerous.
Yeah. I am pretty opinionated, and it's starting to cost me. No, it's one of those things that is very fascinating to me. Again, with a startup or someone who comes into a public work, you do public work. The ability to be thick-skinned, the desire to be well-liked is so strong, and yet the desire to speak the truth is so much stronger. So.
No, and that gets a lot of priests and bishops and politicians into big trouble.
Yeah.
They want to be liked.
Yeah.
That creates horrible problems for the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Choosing that. So again, this is a very broad sort of question, I guess, but you have a view. You have more of a bird's eye view than myself. On things, I guess. But I'm just fascinated in what you're seeing in the world, and what you're, you mentioned China, you mentioned there's geopolitical movement, there's these things going on, there's locally, there's we've got some influence of ideologies. It's quite a mess of things that's going on in the world, but there's also a lot of good things going on. What's catching your eye?
Well, I'm always ready to be surprised by the unexpected.
Okay, yeah, wow.
Both good and bad.
Beautiful, yeah.
Because it's happened so many times, okay? I never give up hope, but I don't know what will bring about the good that will happen. But I've seen totally unexpected good happen that I would never have thought was possible. Right now, the situation in the world looks very grim, very, very grim. But still, I'm hopeful that God will send us through His graces some totally unexpected, great goodness or persons that will turn things around somewhere along the way. And I say that because I've seen it happen. I've experienced it happen. There's too many pessimists. Now, they often think I'm pessimist, but I'm not, Truth is not pessimism. Facing reality is not pessimism. But why we publish the truth is so that hopefully through publishing the truth, there are people out there who will then change what they're doing, or they will take action that will improve the world or their community or a particular situation, which they would not otherwise have done had they not received this information that we publish and this evidence that we publish. Others are so determined to hang on to their prideful opinions and views, nothing will change them. Well, there's nothing I can do about that. That is between them and God. And I just hope eventually their eyes, their minds and their hearts will be open to what contradicts their very firm opinions and views, and that the evidence will manifest it to them in a personal way somewhere along the line. So with COVID, and the vaccines and all of that, that has been a very big challenge, terrible challenge. You know? But now we're seeing a lot more people suffering from COVID, from having taken the vaccine. And that was a really hard thing for people to admit. Because they were so adamant, that they have to do this. Anybody who doesn't do this is crazy. And you're paranoid and so on. And they think they have to take that back and humble themselves. Well, they don't. They just have to move on and admit the truth. That's all. But a lot of people don't want to do that, you know. It's unfortunate. So that expands into the whole world. It's the same thing.
Absolutely.
So like Trump, for instance, he never admits he's wrong. That's bad. That's really bad. You know,
pretty dangerous.
But when he does the right thing, I give him full due. You know, I never hesitate from doing that. Anybody who is in a problem and they do something right, I say, we got to publish that. We have to make sure everybody knows he did this, which is right. And that's good for all of us, you know? And, so anyway.
Absolutely. Well, that's really, really beautiful stuff. I'd love to talk more about your travels, because that's another part of your life that is fascinating. But, I guess before we kick off, do you have anything just, we don't really have to, but if you have anything that's just, I don't know, that's sort of on your mind, that you something that keeps you going, maybe something that inspired your day, your work, or message.
I've met a lot of unbelievably wonderful people in my life, and some of them I'm sure will be declared a saint at some time, and they've inspired me tremendously and humbled me a lot, and many of them experienced tremendous persecution and ridicule from family, friends, and work colleagues, and yet they persevered. And that's actually inspired me and kept me going. They've gone through that, and then I've seen what they've turned out to be, and I say, okay, I'm going to hold firm to what I know is the truth and not allow myself to be intimidated by personal intimidations to not do what I know I should do. That's it. And I view it all as being faithful to God. That's how I view it. And all the saints, who all went through that.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Well,
okay,
Steve, thanks so much.
Okay,
I super
you're welcome.
appreciate it. So
okay.